Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, saw this coming. 1 minute T, I was moving like the untouchable king of Atlanta, a man who had survived scandals, beefs, federal cases, and still walked around like his crown could never slip. And then, overnight, it all started collapsing. But here's the part that has the entire internet in chaos right now. It wasn't the industry, it wasn't the feds, it wasn't even his rivals. It was Atlanta women. Yeah, you heard that right. Women from his own city. Voices nobody expected. Stepping forward one by one, dropping receipts, telling stories, exposing moments that were never supposed to leave the room. And just when people thought it couldn't get any worse, enter 50 Cent, not quietly, not respectfully, but in full troll mode, amplifying everything, reposting clips, adding commentary, and turning what might have been contained drama into a full-blown public execution. Suddenly, timelines were flooded, clips started resurfacing, old interviews got reanalyzed. Private situations dragged into the spotlight, and the craziest part? Some of these women weren't random. They were connected, close enough to know details that made fans stop and say, "Wait, how did they know that?" Now the internet is asking one terrifying question. Was this a coordinated takedown? Or did something happen behind the scenes that pushed these women to speak all at once? Because sources, yeah, those insiders nobody can verify but everyone believes, are saying this didn't just happen. They're claiming this was building for a long time. And what really has fans on edge right now is the rumor that 50 Cent didn't just react. He may have known this was coming. Let that sink in. Because if that's true, then what we're watching isn't just a scandal, it's a setup, a perfectly timed collapse. A moment where everything T.I. built, his image, his respect, his legacy, started cracking in real time. Trust me. What came out next? It didn't just damage his career, it made people question everything they thought they knew about him. And just when T.I. thought he could control the narrative, that's when the first woman spoke out publicly. And everything spiraled out of control. To understand why this situation hit like a nuclear explosion, you have to understand who T.I. really was to Atlanta, and why what's happening right now feels like a complete betrayal to some, and a long overdue reckoning to others. Because this isn't just about a rapper. This is about a man who built an empire. A man who positioned himself as the voice of the streets, the king of the South. Someone who didn't just represent Atlanta, he defined it for an entire generation. From the outside looking in, T.Y.'s story was almost legendary. He came up rough. He fought his way through the industry. He turned a street credibility into mainstream success. And over time, he transformed himself. Less reckless, more calculated, more mature. Or at least, that's what people thought. He started speaking like a mentor, giving interviews about growth, talking about responsibility, family, leadership. Yeah, and he wasn't just making music anymore. He was building an image. A brand that said, "I've been through it all, and I came out smarter." And for a while, people believed it. But here's where things start getting uncomfortable. Because while that polished image was being pushed to the public, there were whispers. Quiet conversations happening behind the scenes. Stories that never quite made headlines, but never fully disappeared either. Moments where people would say things like, "Yeah, but that's not the full story." And every now and then, something would slip out. A rumor here. A vague accusation there. A strange interview clip that made people pause. But nothing ever stuck. Why? Because I had something powerful on his side. Control. Control over his narrative. Control over his platform. Control over how the public saw him. And in Atlanta, that control was even stronger because this was his city. The same streets that raised him, respected him. The same culture that built him, protected him. And let's be honest, a lot of people weren't trying to go against that. Not publicly. Not when your career, your connections, your reputation could all be affected by one wrong move. So for years, the story stayed in the shadows until they didn't, because everything changed when social media stopped being just a place for promotion and turned into a weapon. Now suddenly people didn't need permission to speak. They didn't need media outlets. They didn't need approval. All they needed was a phone and a story. And that's when things started shifting. Because once one voice speaks, it gives others courage. And according to sources, again, on the kind that make you question everything, they're saying that's exactly what happened here. One woman spoke privately, then another, and before anyone realized what was happening, there was a pattern. Now here's where things get even more intense. Because around the same time these whispers started getting louder, there was already tension brewing in the background. And guess who was right in the middle of it? 50 Cent. Now, if you know anything about 50, you already know he doesn't just sit back and mind his business. He watches, he waits. And when he sees an opportunity, he strikes. And his history with T.I.? Let's just say it wasn't exactly friendly. There had been subtle jabs before. Competitive energy. Moments where you could tell these two weren't exactly allies. Nothing explosive at first, but definitely something simmering under the surface. And 50 Cent? He's known for one thing above everything else: turning moments into chaos. So when these Atlanta women started speaking, when clips started resurfacing, when conversations started gaining traction, 50 didn't ignore it. He leaned in, hard, posting, commenting, reacting in ways that made millions of people stop scrolling and pay attention. And suddenly, what could have been a local situation turned into a global conversation. But here's the part nobody can fully explain yet. Why did all of this happen now? Why did multiple voices come forward at the same time? Why did it align so perfectly with the moment 50 Cent chose to amplify it? And why are insiders hinting that some of these stories go back years, but were only just now being told? Yeah, because if that's true, then this isn't just drama. This is timing. Strategic timing. And if you think that's where things stop, you're not ready for what happened next. Because the moment the first public accusation dropped, it didn't just shake T.I.'s image. It triggered a chain reaction that nobody, not even him, could control anymore. It all exploded. In a way nobody could contain anymore. Not behind closed doors, not in whispers, not in vague he said, she said conversations. No. This time, it was public. It started with one video. A woman, Atlanta-based, not a celebrity, but not unknown either, went live late at night. No filters, no edits, just raw emotion. Her voice was shaking, but not from fear, from anger. From something that sounded like it had been buried for years. And the first words out of her mouth? They think we were going to stay quiet forever. That's when people leaned in, because instantly, this didn't feel like a random rant. This felt calculated. Within minutes, the clip started spreading. People clipped it, reposted it, broke it into segments. And in that video, she didn't just speak in general terms. She named T.I. directly, not once, not vaguely, but clearly. She described situations, alleged private encounters, conversations, environments that sounded way too specific to ignore. Rooms, dates, people who were allegedly present. And then she said something that made the entire internet freeze. This wasn't just me. Boom. That one sentence? That's what turned everything from one story into something much bigger. Because within hours, another woman posted, then another. And this is where things got dangerous. Yeah, because these weren't identical stories, but they had overlaps. Similar locations, similar timelines, similar descriptions of behavior. Enough similarity to make people stop and say, wait, how are they all saying the same type of thing? Now here's where it gets even more intense. Screenshots started appearing, alleged DMs, voice notes, old photos. Nothing fully confirmed, but just enough to keep the fire burning. And once social media smells smoke, you already know what happens next. It turns into a wildfire. Twitter threads started breaking everything down. Timeline of events. Receipts exposed. Connecting the dots. People who had never even followed T.I. were suddenly deep diving into years of content. Old interviews were clipped, lyrics were re-examined. Moments that once seemed harmless now looked suspicious. But the real shift happened when the conversation moved from, "Is this true?" to, "What if it is?" And that's when 50 Cent stepped in. Not with sympathy, not with caution, but with gasoline. He posted one of the clips, added a caption that didn't accuse directly but implied enough to send people into a frenzy. Something like, "Damn, Atlanta talking crazy right now." That was it. He didn't need to say more, because when 50 posts something, people pay attention, and suddenly, millions who hadn't even seen the original video were now watching it, reposting it, debating it, arguing over it, and 50? He kept going, posting again, reacting again, dropping subtle jabs that made it clear he wasn't just observing, he was enjoying this. And here's the twist nobody expected. Because as all this chaos was building, someone dug up an old interview, years ago. A clip where T.I. was speaking confidently, almost jokingly, about situations involving women, power dynamics, and control. At the time, it was brushed off, seen as just talk. But now, with everything happening, that same clip felt different, darker. People started saying, wait, was he telling us all along? And that's when the narrative shifted again. Because now it wasn't just about new allegations. It was about reinterpreting the past. And once the past gets pulled into the present, there's no going back. Brands started getting tagged. Sponsors started getting questioned. Are you still working with him? Do you support this? The pressure started building. Fast. And behind the scenes, the sources were whispering something even more unsettling. They were claiming that T.I. had been warned, that people close to him knew these stories existed, that there were chances to address it early, but they chose not to. Now, whether that's true or not, nobody can fully confirm, but the rumor alone was enough to push the situation into overdrive. Because now the question wasn't just what happened. It became, what did he know, and when? And just when it felt like things couldn't get more intense, that's when a fourth woman came forward, with a detail so specific, so unexpected, that it completely changed the direction of the entire story. And this is where everything flipped. Because when that fourth woman spoke, it didn't just add to the noise. It redefined the entire situation. She didn't go live screaming. She didn't rant emotionally. No, she came in calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that makes people uneasy. Because it feels rehearsed, intentional. Like someone who knows exactly what they're about to do. And the first thing she said? I wasn't going to say anything. But now I have no choice. That line alone sent chills across social media. Because by this point, people were already on edge. They were watching closely, waiting, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. But what came next? Nobody was ready for it. She claimed, again, alleged, that there were recordings, not just messages. Not just screenshots, but actual audio. Conversations that, according to her, proved that some of these interactions weren't isolated incidents. They were part of something more organized, something more structured. And instantly, the internet exploded, because now the narrative shifted from multiple women with similar stories to, what if there's proof? Clips started circulating, unverified, distorted, partially edited, but enough to make people lean in even harder. People were replaying them, enhancing audio, arguing in comments, "Is that his voice? No, that's fake. Wait, listen again." And in the middle of all this chaos, one name kept trending, T.I., but right behind it, another name started climbing fast. Because while everyone was focused on the allegations, 50 Cent was doing something very strategic. He wasn't just reposting anymore, he started curating the narrative, pulling specific clips, highlighting certain moments, ignoring others. And if you've watched 50 long enough, you already know what that means. He was shaping the story in real time. At one point, he posted a side-by-side comparison. Old interview clip, new allegation, and just added a single line. "This aging different now." That was it, but it hit hard. Because suddenly, people weren't just reacting emotionally on someone, they were connecting dots. And here's where things took an even darker turn. Because insiders, again, those mysterious sources close to the situation, started leaking something that made everything feel even more calculated. They claimed some of these women had tried to speak before, years ago, but were silenced. Not necessarily threatened directly, but pressured, discouraged, told it would hurt their future. Now again, no official proof. But the idea alone was enough to shift public sympathy instantly. It's because now it wasn't just about allegations. It was about power, influence, who gets to speak, and who gets shut down. And that's when mainstream attention started creeping in. Blog sites picked it up. YouTube channels started breaking it down. Commentators began choosing sides, some saying, "This is long overdue." Others arguing, "This is a coordinated attack." But no matter what side people were on, nobody was ignoring it anymore. And then came the moment that truly shocked everyone. Because during one of these viral breakdowns, someone pointed out a connection, a very specific connection, between two of the women. They had been in the same place, on the same night, years apart from when they claimed to have met T.I., which raised a terrifying question. How were they connected? And more importantly, who else was there? That question? That's what pushed everything into a new level of panic. Because now people weren't just looking at T.I. individually. They were looking at a possible network, a pattern, something bigger than just one person. And right when that theory started gaining traction, a supposed list began circulating online. Names, initials, hints at other figures who may have been present in some of these alleged situations. Unverified, messy, but dangerous. Because once a list starts spreading, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. The damage is already happening. Now, celebrities who had nothing to do with the original story were getting dragged in. Tagged, questioned, forced to respond, and guess who amplified that list the fastest? Yeah, 50 Cent. He didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. I just posted it with a caption like, "Y'all wild for this one." And that was enough. Because when 50 acknowledges something, it becomes real to a lot of people. Now here's the cliffhanger nobody can ignore. Because while all of this was happening publicly, there were rumors that T.I. had gone completely silent behind the scenes. No statements, no interviews, no direct responses, which only made people more suspicious. Because if this was all false, why not shut it down immediately? Why not come out strong? Instead, silence. And in today's world, silence doesn't calm things down. It makes them louder. But just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more chaotic, that's when the public itself turned this into a full-blown war, dividing into sides, and dragging the entire industry into the middle of it. At this point, and it wasn't even a story anymore. It was a full-blown war. Timelines weren't just active, they were exploding. Every platform, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, felt like it was moving at double speed, with thousands of posts hitting every second, each one louder, messier, and more emotional than the last. And right in the center of it all, T.I. But now, he wasn't just being discussed, he was being judged in real time. You had one side saying, "This is exactly what happens when powerful people think they can get away with anything." While the other side fired back, "Y'all are destroying a man's life over unproven stories." And just like that, the internet split into two. No middle ground, no patience, no waiting for facts, just chaos. Hashtag started trending within hours. Well, hashtag TI exposed, hashtag Atlanta speaks, hashtag stand with T, hashtag cancel T. Each one carrying thousands, sometimes millions of posts. And what made it worse? The tone. People weren't just debating, they were attacking. Old fans turning into critics overnight. Supporters digging up anything they could to defend him. Strangers arguing like they had personal stakes in the situation. And then came the celebrities. Because once industry names start speaking, that's when things hit a different level. Some stayed vague, posting cryptic messages like, "The truth always finds its way out." Others were more direct, subtle shade, indirect comments. Little jabs that made it clear they were watching and they had opinions. And of course, 50 Cent was still leading the charge. At this point, he wasn't just reacting, and he had turned himself into the main commentator of the entire situation. Every few hours, new post, new reaction, new caption that made people laugh, but also made the situation feel even more serious. Because behind the humor, there was pressure. Massive pressure. Brands started getting dragged into the conversation. Why are you still associated with him? Are you going to speak on this? Silence is complicity. And companies hate one thing more than anything else: controversy they can't control. So quietly. Without announcements. Without explanations. Things started shifting. Appearances got canceled. Collaborations went quiet. Mentions disappeared. Nothing official, but noticeable. Very noticeable. Meanwhile, media outlets began picking it up more aggressively. Headlines started forming narratives. Yeah, allegations mount. Internet divided. Career at risk. And once mainstream media locks onto something, it stops being online drama. It becomes public record. But here's where things got even more intense. Because the fans weren't just reacting, they were investigating. Deep dives, threads breaking down timelines, comparing stories, analyzing every word, every clip, every detail. Some people were convinced this was the truth finally coming out. Others believed it was a coordinated hit job. And the scariest part? Both sides had arguments that sounded believable, which made everything feel even more unstable. Because now nobody knew what to believe anymore. And right in the middle of all this noise, something unexpected happened. A former associate, someone who had stayed silent the entire time, liked a post. That's it. Just a like. But the post, it supported the women. Within minutes. Screenshots were everywhere. People zooming in, circling the name, posting captions like, "Why would they like this if it wasn't true?" Now suddenly, it wasn't just random voices. It felt like people from inside the circle were quietly choosing sides. And that made everything worse. Because now the question wasn't just who's telling the truth. It became who's staying silent and why. And just when the pressure felt like it couldn't get any heavier, a rumor started spreading that completely changed the stakes. Whispers that something legal, something official, might be coming next. No confirmations, no documents, just talk. But strong enough that even people defending TI started getting nervous. Because if that rumor turned out to be true, then everything happening online would just be the beginning. And what comes next might not be controlled by social media anymore, just when people thought the situation had already reached its breaking point. That's when everything took a turn nobody was prepared for. Because late one night, when the noise had slightly slowed, when people thought maybe things were starting to settle, a leak dropped, not a rumor, not a vague post, not a blurry screenshot, a document. Now listen carefully, because this is where the entire narrative shifted again. The document allegedly was tied to a legal inquiry. Not a full case, not charges, but something official enough to make people pause and say, wait, this just got serious. It referenced multiple claims, multiple individuals, and while names were partially redacted, there was just enough detail for the internet to connect the dots back to T.I. Now, whether the document was 100% real, that's still being debated. But here's the problem. It looked real. Structured language, official formatting, legal terminology that most people don't just make up casually. And once it hit social media, everything exploded. Again. People weren't arguing anymore. They were panicking. Because this crossed a line. This wasn't just he said, she said anymore. This felt like something that could move offline into real consequences. And right as that fear started building, something even stranger happened. Because according to multiple insider accounts, T.I. had allegedly held a private meeting. No cameras, no recordings. Yeah, just a closed-door conversation with a small group of people he trusted. And whatever was said in that room, it didn't stay there. Because whispers started leaking almost immediately. Claims that he was blindsided. Claims that he believed this was coordinated. Claims that certain names, people nobody had publicly mentioned yet, were somehow involved behind the scenes. And then came the line that shook everything. He knows who's really behind this. That sentence? That's what flipped the energy completely. Because now, this wasn't just about accusations anymore. It became a chess game. Who moved first? Who's controlling the narrative? Who benefits from all of this? And once that idea entered the conversation, people started looking at everything differently, especially one person, because suddenly, the eyes shifted right back to 50 Cent. Not just as a commentator, but as a possible player. Now again, no proof. But the timing? Too perfect for some people to ignore. He was early on it. He amplified it fast. He kept it alive when it could have faded. And fans started asking, did he just react? Or did he know? And just when that theory started gaining traction, 50 posted something that made everything even more unsettling. A short clip. No explanation, no context, just a caption. Everything come out eventually. Just wait. That's it, but the tone? Different. Less joking, more serious. Almost like he knew something the public didn't, and within minutes... That post went viral because now people weren't just watching the situation unfold. They were waiting for the next drop, the next leak, the next voice, the next piece of evidence. Because at this point, everyone could feel it. This wasn't over. Not even close. If anything, it felt like the beginning of something much bigger. Something that could pull in more names, more stories, more secrets that were never meant to come out. And the most chilling part, there are still people who haven't spoken yet. People who, according to whispers, are watching how this plays out before deciding whether to come forward. So the real question is, what happens when they do? Because if one more major voice steps into this, if one more piece of real evidence surfaces, then what we've seen so far might look small compared to what's coming next. And trust me, the next update could change everything. Now I need you to be real for a second. After everything you just heard, whose side are you on? Do you think this is the truth finally coming out about T.I.? Or do you believe this is a perfectly timed setup? Something bigger happening behind the scenes that we're not fully seeing yet? And what about 50 Cent? Is he just reacting like he always does? Or do you think he knows way more than he's letting on? I'm telling you right now, this situation is far from over. There are still unanswered questions, still missing pieces, still people who haven't spoken yet. So drop your thoughts in the comments, but don't just say yes or no. Break it down. Tell me what you think is really happening behind the scenes. And if you've been following this story from the start, you already know how fast things are moving. So make sure you like this video because the next update is going to go even deeper. And don't forget to subscribe because the moment new details drop, New leaks, new reactions, new twists. You already know we're going to break it all down right here. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next.